Welcome, everybody. I'm Jim Rosapep, chair of the Italian-American Democratic Leadership Council, and we're glad to have you join us today with Congressman Chris Deluzio. The crowd is slowly building, so I'm going to talk a little bit, but leave the time for Chris to talk with all of you. For those of you who don't know the Italian-American Democratic Leadership Council, we are the national Italian-American PAC, been around about 30 years. As I like to say, we were for Nancy Pelosi before it was cool. And you today are getting to know Chris Deluzio before it was cool. We worked with Chris since his first campaign for Congress in 2022, very active with that campaign, and his reelection in 2024. And he's been very active with us. And in fact, right now is helping us with our campaigns for this fall, which you'll hear more about in the next week, because we're about to roll out our endorsements. We're not going to give it away today, but we're rolling out our endorsements for House, Senate, and governorships. More to come. Chris Deluzio is a graduate of the Naval Academy, a Navy veteran, a lawyer, a very active champion of the values that the Italian-American Democratic Leadership Council believes in. And we're just thrilled to have him join us today. Everyone will have a chance to ask questions, but I'm going to start off with two. Congressman, how are things going in the U.S. House these days?
Yeah. Well, that's a big question. Anyone who's been following the House this week knows it's a mess. The Republicans, if you haven't been following that closely, canceled votes a couple hours ago for the rest of this week. They've lost control of the floor once again. They failed to pass a rule, which, back to Speaker Nancy Pelosi, would never have happened when she's Speaker, I am told. So Mike Johnson is a very different and much weaker speaker than we ever had with Nancy D'Alessandro Pelosi, who, again, would never have presided over such chaos in the House. But they've lost control. And this time stemming from Donald Trump refusing to sign a pretty good and bipartisan housing bill, which, if I were the president right now, who had just made life way more expensive for everyone because of a war and started trade wars, and you were handed a bill that was popular that would make housing a little cheaper, I'd probably sign it. Instead, he's done all of this. So that's a somewhat of a long-winded answer, Jim, it's not going so well for the Republicans who run the House, as you know.
Well, let's turn to a more positive subject, which is, what do you tell Italian-American voters in Pennsylvania about why they should vote for the Democrats this fall?
So I'm going to start with a little bit about my district.
Great.
Which substantial Italian-American population, Western Pennsylvania. So all around Pittsburgh to Beaver County out in the west, bordering Ohio and West Virginia. A lot of manufacturing towns dotting the rivers. And just, you can trace the immigrant story to when this mill was hiring and where people were coming from. Maybe it was the Great Migration in the South, or it was Italians, or you can figure out who was coming to this country and when their people came looking for work in my part of the world. So pretty proud part of my district. And I talk about the American dream all the time. I talk about my family's roots, coming here looking for their slice of the American dream, which is how a lot of people's families at different points in time came to this country, whether they came on their own or were brought in chains to this country. Ultimately, we're coming eventually to a place like Pittsburgh from the South, or on a boat from Italy, looking for the American dream. And I see, and I'm 41 for another week or so. If you are my age or younger, we are now the first Americans. The data says you don't get to expect to be better off than your parents, which was a fundamental pitch of the American dream from World War II onward. And that's fraying and broken. And I could talk directly about that, about why that's happened and what we have to do to change it. And I'll be candid. There are a lot of people who are comfortable criticizing Donald Trump and talking about his corruption and failures. And believe me, I do. And I'm saying this as a guy who, he threatened to throw in prison over a video I made with some other veterans and Senator Slotkin and Mark Kelly. Simply opposing Donald Trump is not going to change the trajectory of the American dream in this country. We should oppose him and point out his failures. But if you aren't confronting that basic failure of our government across decades, if you aren't working to rebuild the thing that would reward hard work that my Italian American ancestors fought, strive for, you're not meeting this moment. And it's a pretty core part of my political ideas about what our government has to do differently and better. And so, again, a little bit of a longer answer, but yes, it's how I talk to Italian American voters in my own community. It's how I talk to voters in general, because it's part of the American story that we are losing. And I saw a poll within the last month, something like 80% of Americans think the American dream is now more out of reach, harder to achieve. And they're right. And we have to fix it.
You touched on why your family came and other families came. I neglected to ask at the beginning of this, as we always do, for those who don't know you, where does your family come from in Italy?
The Italians, two different parts. Lazio, so somewhere near Rome. I don't know exactly the town. And as best I know, the other half, outside Naples, the town is Montefraddane. Is the best information I have. Now I've got to go and eventually get some better record keeping, but that's and for my family, the Italians settled in a town called Jeanette, which is less than an hour, about an hour east of where I now live in Pittsburgh, next county over to the east. So they didn't stray far once we got here.
Great. So let's open up for questions from our participants here. Just raise your hand in the Zoom. There you go. I can't read your name, Rich.
Yes, it's
There you
Rich.
go.
Rich Platoni. Congressman, very impressed with your background. Seen you on, I guess, MS Now recently and some of the other networks. We're fortunate to have you here. My family settled many years ago, late 19th century, in a place called the Bronx, New York. I know if you're familiar. I am still a
baseball
resident.
team there? I don't know.
There is a baseball team here, not in Riverdale, my neighborhood, but not too far away. I have a question that, it's been on my mind, my family's mind, certainly, and certainly in the scary category, not to start off with a scary question, but this voter suppression law, otherwise known as the SAFE Act, Save America Act, how worried should we be? I know we have to be on guard, not to preface the question. How worried should we be that actually could get enacted before the midterms?
Rich, thanks for the question. And I'll leave out, because it's before my life, bringing up the 1960 World Series and Bill Mazeroski. Looms large for us. Okay.
Okay. We won't talk about it. He just passed away, by the way. Anyway.
Believe me, we know. But look, I think the concern I have and others have is a real one. And I think you should be concerned. And the first question about, well, what's going on in the House? How are things going for the Republican majority? The source of this dysfunction right now is Donald Trump refusing to sign the housing bill because he wants this Save America Act or SAVE Act sent to him to sign. And the Republicans who control the House have already passed it out of the House. The Senate doesn't have the votes to do it. But now you saw efforts from House colleagues of mine who are Republicans to try to attach it to the defense bill, to find a vehicle to force the Senate to take it up. That's what led to the breakdown this week. So they are really scrambling to try to get this to Donald Trump's desk. And there are lots of problems with this bill. I won't list all of them. But one of the most common is that, a passport, which would, if I understand the law correctly or the bill, would work for what they require, this documentary proof of citizenship to vote and register. Well, more than half of Americans don't have a passport, number one. And when you throw that on top of that point, women who may have changed their name, which is the most common category of people whose names don't match their birth certificate, a driver's license plus a birth certificate won't work for those women because the names will be different. And that is a recipe for disenfranchising a lot of eligible American voters, overwhelmingly women and married women who change their name. Not the only group of people who'll be affected, because these burdens will hit a lot of voters, but that's the largest category, I think, and really tells you the stakes of this thing. I mean, we're talking about citizens who are eligible to vote, period. No question. But because of these requirements, so many will drop off and will lose that fundamental right.
Gary, very, just incredibly scary.
Can I say one more thing, actually?
Sure, please.
When this bill was being debated and passed through the House, I offered an amendment, which was, of course, made out of order by the Republicans. They wouldn't even let us debate it or have a vote on it. But the amendment was simple. It was like, okay, you guys want to talk about voter ID and election security. And by the way, I worked on election security and voting rights after the military. I became a lawyer later. Before I was elected, I worked on this stuff. I said, you guys are so serious. You want to talk about that? Okay. My amendment will provide for a national form of identification that everyone will get at no cost that can be used for exactly these purposes in voting. They wouldn't even give me a vote. That's not what this is about.
It's purely, it is obviously, it's about suppression. Yeah,
exactly. Charles, you're on.
Jim, thank you very much. Representative Deluzio, thanks for being part of this. Give you my background. My dad is Sicilian. I grew up in Queens, where we have another great baseball team. But I'll leave that for another time. Obviously in New York, there have been some really key races. I would say some seismic races. When you look at the Democratic Party, being part of the DNC and their finance committee, I think it sent some shockwaves, but the candidates that won here in New York, are all running on issues that are affecting people nationwide: affordability, fair wages. How is that affecting the constituents in your district? And how are you having to maybe change your message at all? I just wanted to see, how that's affecting other parts of the country outside of New York City.
I mean, look, Pittsburgh's housing is more affordable than New York's. I know that. And yet we have the same problems. I mean, I use Pittsburgh to mean like the region of southwestern Pennsylvania, not just the city proper. We have the same problems around housing costs and cost of living that affect Americans all over the country. And, I in my first run in 2022, I was talking about and hammering home price gouging and cost of living and the economic fight, having to push back, frankly, against the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, and folks in Washington who really wanted the campaign to be just about abortion rights or other things. And I talked about those things, but I've made the economic fight a core part of my job, how I campaign, because I also know when you talk to voters, when I talk to my constituents, and it could be, parents with young kids. I have 4 kids from 9 down to younger than 2. It could be folks in retirement. There's a different flavor of the problem I hear the most, which is life is too expensive. Life is out of reach. That American dream point I get to. And I keep talking about, look, if we're talking about the cost of living emergency and affordability, that's good. We have to meet those goals, but that is the floor. And I talk about the good life, the American dream. I often talk about my grandfather, my mother's side, to highlight this. He came home from World War II. He served in the Navy. He got a union job with the city of Pittsburgh. He owned a modest house in the West End kind of neighborhood of the city, which no one here will know what it is if you aren't from Pittsburgh. That's okay. And, my mom, her brother, my uncle got to, live a decent life. They owned the house. My grandfather and my grandmother got to retire with a modest pension. My mother got to go to public college without crushing debt and worked her way through it. They got to go to the doctor when they needed to. All of those things were policy choices that said that this guy's hard work would pay off. Now, the government in this country has made different choices that each step of the way has made that life seem impossible for people who are my age or younger. And I want to change that. I'm not just painting some nostalgic picture, but we should dream bigger than just you can get by and afford your life. You should get by and afford your life, but there should be a good life in a country as rich as ours. Going to take your kids to a ball game, take a vacation, be able to go to the doctor when you need to, be able to pay for your kids' youth sports and activities and dance and all the rest. So much about the American dream, I think, has just been fraying away and ripped away. And we should be confronting that, and that should be the fundamental fight. And I see it, by the way, in really deep blue districts where there's a flavor of this fight that might sound or look different. But I see a very similar fight play out in the most competitive districts, and that's more the category where I have been. And I think if Democrats can meet that moment and have real answers and can identify the villains or the forces that have killed it away, we can earn trust with voters and we can win.
Thank you. Pascal?
So, Chris, thanks very much for taking the time with us today, and thanks for your service to our country. So really appreciate it. One thing I was going to mention to you is I'm in California and I've lived here most of my life. However, my formative years, I grew up in Mount Lebanon. So I don't know, is Mount Lebanon in your district?
Mount Lebanon's in my district.
Okay, so I would be a constituent. So anyway, I'm a fellow Yinzer. Anyway, so my question, so I was going to ask about the Save America Act, but anyway, so someone else did, but I wanted to comment that I liked what you got in there about just the practicality of it and how it disenfranchises like at least half of the, right, almost half of the population, having to show like, hey, my birth certificate has to match my ID or what have you. So we don't hear that a lot when I hear people interviewed. So I think folks like dance around that, but I think being very clear about that's important, and among other impractical aspects of trying to enact something like that right before the midterms. But putting that aside, my second question, sort of build on that, is on the positive side, what are your views about addressing gerrymandering and what have you? I know, like, I think Representative Swazi and Fitzpatrick have something out there on, helping to address some of the issues with, gerrymandering and what have you. I'm sort of curious on the proactive side, do you think there'll be any traction around that in Congress, or if Democrats take control, there might be some traction for a bipartisan effort? Just curious about your views on that.
Yeah, I mean, in the current Congress, there's been nothing moving to go at gerrymandering. And I should start from, I don't think this is healthy or good for our country and our Constitution and our democracy. I think, to see these changed maps mid-decade, to see it as like a race to the bottom of stretching and drawing these weird districts. And I get it. If Republicans are doing this as aggressively as they are, Democrats, where they can, need to respond. Like, I understand. I totally understand. But the solution here is for a federal ban. Let's just take it off for everybody. Right. We should do it in the Congress. I understand there was anti-gerrymandering language in the old H.R. 1, the For the People Act, which had different names before I was in the House, that they passed out of the House but died in the Senate. We should do this in the Congress and just take political partisan gerrymandering off the table for both parties. Because I think what you end up having is districts that change, that don't represent the broader electorate, that have representation that shifts all over the place, where communities are stretched. I just don't think this is a healthy thing. And you see it on the battleground, which is, the list of congressional districts that are competitive. It's shrinking. It's shrinking to a tinier and tinier share of congressional races. I'm in one of those districts. In both of my races, there have been millions of dollars spent. It's a place where you have to compete. I think that's healthy, that you have to go and compete for votes. You're from Mount Lebanon, Western Pennsylvania, and there have been parts that have shifted to the left and to the right, but it's competitive terrain. Yeah. And I think having to go and earn votes is good. And, not being able to be too comfortable in a district is good. And having a statewide delegation into the U.S. House that broadly reflects how the state votes is also pretty healthy and good for democracy. So I'm not saying anyone should unilaterally disarm and people should be meek in the face of aggressive Republican gerrymandering. Don't confuse me. But I think on a federal level, we should take action on this, and we should just take partisan gerrymandering off the table.
Chris, we know you've got a plane to catch, so we got 5 minutes here. We got 2 questions. Let's make them kind of
I'll keep them tight.
Joseph?
Hello, Congressman. As a West Point grad, I'll speak extra slow so you understand what I'm saying. So do you envision yourself, or maybe the hopefully Democratic majority in the fall, to take up more antitrust legislation, antitrust enforcement, to deal with AI, inequality, the tech oligarchs, and the dozens of corporatization across fields, including private equity roll-ups?
Jim, you want me to respond, or you want to do both?
Why don't we do both? Yeah. Why don't we do both?
I'll come back.
Marianne, you got to be off mute. Yep. Should be. You're on mute again. You're on mute.
I just had props. I just listened to too many podcasts, but how concerned should we be about there might be the Democrats and the Democratic Socialists don't play nice and it can be used as a weapon? Okay.
All right. I'll take them both. Number one, beat Army. Number two, look, we're having an internal debate as House Democrats about what if we take the majority, and I take nothing for granted. We have to go and earn that with the voters, what to do. And of course, there has to be accountability where there's been rule breaking and oversight and all the rest. I totally get it and agree. But I think our principal focus has to be economic. And there's a piece of this that's antitrust, no doubt. There's a piece of this that is addressing the very urgent cost of living emergency, but you've heard me talk about the broader fight, the American dream, public investment, industrial policy. There should be and will be, as I understand, renegotiation of NAFTA 2.0, the USMCA, US-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. So we will have trade on the agenda. And Marianne, to your point, it's going to be a Big Ten. It has to be for the majority to hang together. I don't see how else you can govern. Maybe if there's a huge majority, then it's less urgent in that way. But you've got to be able to put together the various pieces of the coalition to govern. And I think it's healthy to have different districts and different kinds of members. That's okay. We find ways to work together, and where we disagree, we disagree. I think that's a normal thing. But Democrats will have to be ready to be unified on some core things. And again, I think the principal focus is this economic package. I worry about competition policy, antitrust policy, and not being enough competition in our economy. So I think it should be part of what we're doing. I've in particular, I've put out a bill with Senator Murphy. It may seem small ball, pun intended, you'll see, but youth sports has been a place that has really been squeezed by PE roll-ups. And once there's been a lack of competition, then gouging and squeezing families. And so it's a place where actually I think you can find maybe even some Republicans who are from sports obsessed parts of the world like I am, that are angry about what's happening with kids and kids sports to do something. So I think wide ranging opportunities, but it's got to be economic and focus. It's got to be delivering, frankly, where we can. And if the president's going to veto good bills that will make life better, that will juice the American dream, well, then our 2028 presidential nominee will have some legislation to point to that if he or she were president, here's what I'd be signing if this president weren't vetoing it. I think that's part of what we'll have to do too.
Congressman, thank you for joining us this evening. We realize that the schedule got a little tight. You got to catch a plane to get back to your district. This is incredibly interesting, incredibly helpful. Thank you for all your help for your fellow Italian American Democrats. And we look forward to your getting reelected, and we're here to help you as well. And to the Democrats being in control, and you being at least a subcommittee chairman, if not speaker.
Listen, Jim and Ambassador, thank you, and thanks everybody for all of your help and support. Look, I think it can feel like there's a lot on all of us in this moment, but it's the time for courage. It's the time for action. I see action. I see courage here. I hope you see it out of me, and let's go win this stuff. Thank you, guys.
Ciao. Just an announcement of coming attractions. Congressman Joe Morelli is going to join us probably in a few weeks, and we'll keep you posted. Thanks for joining us.